a 3-year work plan of the Local Communities and Indigenous People Platform 2022 and 2024 that we humbly had the honor to contribute as part of the facilitated working group. Article 6, outside of the cover decision, for us needs to deliver on the system that allows everyone to provide a robust, enhanced action to implement the NDCs and enhance their climate action. However, those mechanisms, the rules and MPGs for those mechanisms have to allow the participation of all the countries. They have to provide a channel of additional finance to adaptation through the SOP on Article 6.2, the recognition of avoidance, as has been clearly stated, and we support the statement made by the Philippines in that regard, and also a proposal that we made to establish under 6.4 independent grievance mechanisms with full access to parties and other stakeholders to have access and appeal the decisions of the supervisory body and raise grievances. With all these comments, we just reiterate our full support to you, to your presidencies, to all the parties to have and reach a final consensus on these final hours and to have a successful outcome of this COP, not only for the sake of the process, but for the present and future generations, our children, grandchildren, for the most vulnerable and poor that are the real victims of this global threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador, for that intervention. I now call on Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group, comprising Georgia, Liechtenstein, Mexico, Monaco, the Republic of Korea, and Switzerland. From the outset, we stated that our success at this COP will be measured by the strength of our outcomes in 3 areas: rules, finance, and ambition. So the cover decision must send a strong signal for ambitious action on mitigation, adaptation, and the means of implementation. But the current draft does not live up to our expectations. Let me highlight a few elements. The statement should highlight the importance of science. Science has to be the basis of our work and provide the orientation where we have to go. We need to better understand their interlinkages with nature, oceans, the blue planet, and tipping points, critical information to our decision-making process. The language of long-term strategies should be stronger, consistent with the 1.5 target. Moreover, countries should explain how their NDCs are in line with 1.5 or how they will bring their NDCs in line with that objective. Thus, the work program should have a clear and strong mandate to focus on 1.5. We need to emphasize the urgency to scale up adaptation action to enhance adaptive capacity and reduce vulnerability to climate change. Public finance is central to guaranteeing the means of implementation for ambitious climate action, but private finance also plays a critical role, and we must provide the right incentives. Effective climate policy is central to protecting human rights, and the protection of human rights is central for effective climate policy. As many other parties have already mentioned, we must ensure that all climate action respects, promotes, and takes into consideration human rights, gender equality, indigenous peoples' rights, and intergenerational equity. No voice should be left unheard. And finally, climate change is about the future of today's youth. Therefore, we should establish an annual Youth Climate Forum to enrich our views. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mexico, for your intervention. I now call on Panama. Panama, you have the floor.
Señor Presidente, distinguished colleagues, firstly, Panama would like to associate itself with the statements delivered by Guinea on behalf of the G77 plus China, Peru on behalf of ILAC. Additionally, we align with the intervention made by the Dominican Republic and PNG on behalf of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations regarding forest actions and REDD+. Mr. President, we appreciate your hard work in putting forward a good and balanced text which serve as a solid basis for negotiations. We must deliver, and we believe that we are close to deliver. However, the text has really improved, but we must strive for more. Panama's ambition rises from our level of vulnerability, but also from the fact that we are a carbon negative nation. Even though we're carbon negative, we believe we have to do more, and we believe everybody must do more if the survival of humankind is our ultimate objective. Regarding the phase out of coal and fossil fuels, it is sad to see that the current text is weaker than the previous one. Panama would like to echo the voices of youth, scientists, and civil society. We must keep them in the ground. Let's keep them in the ground. Mr. President, the current text does not allow us to keep it on the ground. Secondly, we must keep 1.5 alive. That is the main goal of this conference. If we do not achieve this, we will fail, this conference will fail, and the world as a whole will fail. But in order to keep 1.5 alive, we must ensure that the call to reduce 45% of emissions by 2030 is part of the final version of this text. If we recognize the best available science, we will take a step forward and we will send a right message to the market. Mr. President, we must lead. Moreover, we support the statement given by Korea regarding the annual Youth Forum. We appreciate the current language on the cover decisions to include youth in climate action, especially in decision-making. It is outrageous that the current text does not recognize the importance of international collaboration to understand and address the implications of climate change on global health. This must be a part of the final version. Furthermore, we welcome the recognition and support of the work of the high-level champions in the inclusion of non-state actors for the enhancement of climate action. They have done an outstanding job, and they must be recognized. Additionally, we appreciate the welcoming of the informal summary on the ocean and climate change dialogue, as well as the invitation to integrate and strengthen ocean-based measures in climate action. In terms of Article 6, we strongly believe that the previous efforts of rainforest nations like mine must be recognized, but the current text on Article 6.2 does not provide this assurance. We must assure this in order to move forward. Let me be clear, Mr. President, for Panama, this is a must. Now on loss and damage, we must deliver finance and technical assistance. We believe that we must agree on a platform that is going to truly help the ones suffering the adverse impacts of climate change in the front lines, especially when adaptation is not an option anymore. Therefore, I really ask my developed country colleagues to align their thinking, because right now it is very confusing. In one hand, in this room, they just claim to understand that the climate crisis is real and that it's impacting the most vulnerable, but in another hand, they refuse funding for the people at the front lines. Mr. President, I simply cannot square that circle, and I simply cannot understand their thinking. I just want to remind everybody that the most vulnerable communities did not cause this crisis, but they are paying the highest price. We must deliver for them. This COP must deliver for them. Dear President, everything that we're asking for was already agreed by all of us in 1992. Well, I guess it was agreed by you and all my colleagues because my negotiators and I were not even around. I want to remind this room that the average age of the Panamanian negotiator at this COP is 29 years old, and 65% of our negotiators are young, impressive, and capable women. I guess what I'm trying to say is that our demands are fully in line with the objective of the convention, which seeks to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. But we have double emissions in the past 30 years, and the least responsible are suffering. Colleagues, all we're asking you to do is to keep your promises and own your responsibilities on setting this crisis in motion. Nothing less, nothing more. Mr. President, in 2015, we had a magical moment in Paris. The agreement is all about raising the bar to deliver for our current and future generations. All Panama is asking you, your team, and our colleagues is to keep that magic alive. Leaders do not settle for anything less than 1.5. Leaders defend people and biodiversity above profits and politics. Leaders present pledges that actually get us to real zero. Leaders bring youth from all genders, indigenous peoples, and the most marginalized communities to the tables where their future is being negotiated, just as Panama has done. Leaders see the response of COVID-19 as the single greatest generational opportunity for climate action and economic justice. Mr. President, 1.5 is not a choice. It is a necessity. It is a moral obligation. It is a lifeline. And in order to do that, fossil fuels must be kept in the ground. So, Mr. President, let's keep them in the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Panama, for your intervention. I'll now give the floor to Ghana.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ghana associates itself with the G77 plus China and the views as initiated by the delegate from the Republic of Guinea. Mr. President, my intervention is premised on one principle, that the present generation has rented this planet from the future generation, and we must ensure that we preserve it and deliver it to posterity from the rented generation. Mr. President, this is a moral obligation. It is an ethical issue, and everything that I'm saying is preconditioned on this. Mr. President, if I may go into specifics, Ghana is concerned with the discussions on Article 6, especially on the subject of the share of proceeds. This is critical for Ghana to enable us trade in the needed support for implementation of our updated NDCs. Mr. President, a clear roadmap for delivery of adaptation goal is critical to enable countries like Ghana to cope with the shocks of climate change. Mr. President, finance is very, very critical here, and developed countries must be seen to be making good on their pledges. Small emitters like Ghana will continue to do our bit as expected, and we shall continue to upgrade into high ambition in tandem with the big players. But we suspect that, or we demand that they also up their ambitions. Mr. President, we expect great leadership that demonstrates seriousness towards solving the problems. The principle of common but differentiated responsibility must be reflected in the text in its entirety. We are hopeful that this COP will be successful under your leadership, and also join my colleagues in thanking you for steering this conference thus far. But we await the final outcome, which will make us all take smiles to our various countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ghana, for that intervention. I now call Nicaragua to the floor. Nicaragua, you have the floor.
Mr. President, our speaker is coming back in a second. We would appreciate if he can talk after the next country, please.
Of course. I give the floor to the Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, the Maldives fully supports the statements made by EOSIS, and I also echo the sentiments made by my colleague from Tuvalu. We have spent over 2 weeks in Glasgow to discuss ways to resolve the climate crisis. Me and my small delegation from the Maldives have sat in rooms listening to disagreements on commas, full stops, and words. For small island states, these are debates on the words to describe how quickly we will succumb to the climate emergency. For decades, we have been trying to impress upon world leaders where we are headed. We did not cause the climate crisis. That day is already here, and the science backs us up. Our islands are eroding and flooding more frequently. Our reefs are weakening, while the salt water encroaches further and further. Hurricanes, cyclones, tidal swells are more frequent than ever. We are losing family, friends, and loved ones to extreme weather events. Afterwards, we are forced to close our schools, health centers, and thousands are left without safe homes. The impact of the climate crisis is very real on our development, our well-being, and our ability to envision a future in our homes. It affects our security. It is becoming more challenging to govern because of the constant need to reprioritize national budgets to fund emergency relief and urgent adaptation needs to protect our islands and to provide safe water and shelter. This is an everyday battle for many islands and vulnerable countries. If we commit all our national resources, the Maldives won't be able to do this alone. The Maldives has received approval for 2 projects from the GCF. It's not easy for me to express these sentiments. It's disheartening to note the kind of bureaucracy that we have been asked to realize a project from concept to its approval and inception. It took us years to access these funds. For one project, we were asked to provide scientific proof dating back 30 years that our islands are actually eroding and losing land due to impacts of climate change. Mr. President, the science is so clear. The IPCC has reaffirmed it. We cannot put our survival as collateral. We don't think it is unreasonable to ask to help us to adapt to these changes. We don't think it is unreasonable to ask for adequate, predictable, and sustainable help and access to adaptation finance. The sincerity of the high-level appearances and ambitious statements we have heard over the last few days, specifically from G20 countries, needs to be reflected in the text. In 18 months, the world spent trillions to respond to the pandemic. In the same period, the world has spent trillions on fossil fuels. Clearly, money is not the problem. Excellencies, according to the most trusted science, the IPCC report, we need to halve our emissions by 2030 to limit temperatures to 1.5. We need to see a balance and access to adaptation finance. Treat the climate crisis like an emergency. We have only 98 months to do it, and I think we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maldives, for your intervention. I now give the floor to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity. I'm speaking on behalf of the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Environment of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mr. Chair, the Democratic Republic of Congo would like to acknowledge and thank you for the work done by your presidency and for the effort made by every delegation here. On the issue of pre-2020 credit, we have 2 seats: the Clean Development Mechanism and the red price. Following the Paris Agreement, red price credits have been You should, under COP, approve the effective measurement, reporting, and verification modality. Reference emission levels have been defined and safeguard guidance maintained. Mr. Chair, we can't have a situation where robust red-priced credits and work done for many years by red-plus countries are not recognized. We therefore support a single date for both the clean development mechanism and red price. This is more important for our country, for the Congo Basin, for all red price countries, and for all the world. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you to the Democratic Republic of Congo for that intervention. I now give the floor to Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Argentina will have the honor to speak on behalf of the ABU Group. We welcome the efforts made by the UK presidency to advance the text. Dear colleagues, we are at the final hours of this conference. COP26 must send strong signals that are in line with the ambition that is needed to achieve the goals set in the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement. We welcome that we are all working so hard on making this COP, the COP of raising ambition, and more important, the COP for enabling action. There is no better ambition than concrete action. Action to limit emissions, action to adapt to climate change, action to reduce vulnerabilities, and action to safeguard the lives of those already suffering the worst consequences of climate change. Therefore, ambition must be raised in a balanced manner, because the Paris Agreement must be operationalized considering mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation, reflecting the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in the light of different natural circumstances. And we should not level down. On the contrary, we must level up. We all agree. We all want to keep 1.5 alive. And in that regard, we recall Article 2, Paragraph 1 of the Paris Agreement that aims to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change in the context of sustainable development and efforts to eradicate poverty, and specifically on its point C, on the need to making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development. We need to estimate the cost of the implementation of the SDGs, assess the traditional and innovative means of implementation, and devise a roadmap in order to ensure the enabling conditions for climate action in the context of a just transition. In this sense, it is necessary to reach a decision on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance at this COP, and to move forward in a definition on Article 6 to make use of every tool available while ensuring environmental integrity. In that regard, we support the G77 plus China position on the share of proceeds for adaptation. We also support a package based on option A and welcome the Glasgow Committee on non-market approaches. We look forward to a resolution today for all pending issues on this matter, which has been open for 6 years now. We are disappointed with the fact that many of our concerns and the concerns of many other developing countries were not considered in the COVID decision. The COVID decision must reflect stronger ambition in terms of adaptation and in particular in terms of means of implementation to ensure that we can actually operationalize what we all very much aspire to, a swift economic recovery after COVID pandemic aligned with the Paris Agreement and the promotion of a new era of integral and sustainable development for all. We are all suffering the consequences of climate change. We are all vulnerable to climate change, and we need solutions that fit all. We should not repeat the same mistakes as in Copenhagen. We count on you to engage all parties, and especially developed countries, on a concrete proposal up to the challenge that allows us fast progress and resolutions. Time is running out, and the world is waiting for our urgent action. Let's not waste time in this critical decade. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Argentina, for that intervention. I'll now give the floor to Nicaragua.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your comprehensions. For the time, will be very brief. Mr. Chair, Nicaragua recognizes your excellent work and efforts. Many things about that. We want to be very frank and very direct. Adaptation is insufficient to address with the impact and effect that the climate crisis. In this regard, we need to put loss and damage in the same level on adaptation and mitigations through the workshop and Santiago network. I will to say again, is very emphasizing again, we need to put loss and damage the same level and adaptation and mitigation. I thank Mr. President.
Thank you, Nicaragua, for your intervention. The final party to speak will be Grenada. Grenada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to start by thanking you and your team for your tireless work over these past days, weeks, and months. Grenada associates itself with a statement from AOSIS. Mr. President, I've had the benefit of sitting in the facilitation rooms, hearing all the groups and many parties over many, many hours, talking of our collective priorities around ambition. What we see before us now in the text reflects the desire for ambition and a balanced outcome, and it supports the elements we need to see to keep 1.5 alive. But the text we have before us is the bare minimum, the bare minimum. If we reduce any element of the mitigation text, we can say goodbye to keeping 1.5 alive. Importantly, the text recognizes that we have no time to waste, that our work on ratcheting up ambition continues immediately. This is the critical decade, but to get where we need in 2030, the next 12 months are crucial. We need to further strengthen our 2030 targets next year in 2022, so that we're in line with 1.5 and with the pathway to net zero. There has been some opposition to compromise cover decision text drawn from G20 declaration language. This text provides good solutions to finding balance in the text. I strongly urge parties to accept this text as a way forward. We've heard the importance of delivering on the 3 pillars of ambition, mitigation, adaptation, and finance. If mitigation is the marathon, adaptation is the sprint. We need adaptation finance to be scaled up urgently and made more accessible and predictable. The language in paragraph 18 of the CMA cover decision on doubling adaptation finance and moving towards a balance is a critical step forward. We warmly welcome the language on special drawing rights and the opportunity that this presents. This has the potential to bring additional finance flows to support the climate agenda for vulnerable countries. It provides a creative and doable solution that, if supported by donors and institutions, can move the finance needle. Key elements of the Paris Agreement rulebook remain in the balance. Finalization of the Paris rulebook must support and not undermine keeping 1.5 within reach. Under Article 6, we must move beyond offsetting. OMG must be applied through a mandatory cancellation at issuance with a substantial cancellation rate. On loss and damage, the text is underdone. We need to see more out of this COP than what is in what is in the text currently in the Santiago network and a workshop. The workshop should at least be a work program. We need stronger language. We also need to take bolder steps forward here and now for new and additional finance for addressing loss and damage. Finally, Grenada supports the references to oceans and calls for the reinstatement of the references to nature-based solutions. The linkage between climate change and biodiversity is imperative. Colleagues, the world is watching and expects us to do the right thing. And that is to close this COP with a truly ambitious outcome which keeps 1.5 alive. We cannot let them down. This is our last real chance. As we leave this plenary session and continue our deliberations to reach a final agreement, remember, history will judge us individually and collectively. Let us all deliver on keeping 1.5 alive. I thank you.
Thank you, Grenada, for your intervention. Friends, we've now had 38 parties who have been able to participate in this plenary, and I thank all of you for your interventions. My team and I have taken careful note of the comments and the proposals, and of course we will continue to engage extensively with you over the course of today. And I encourage you to also reach out to one another to try and build consensus. It is of course my hope that we will be able to find textual solutions for our outstanding issues quickly, and my intention is to publish clean versions of relevant text later today for parties' careful consideration and ultimately, I hope, adoption tonight. Now, we started the closing plenary yesterday. Part 2 of that will recommence at 5:30 today to continue the process of adopting a number of the already concluded items whilst we continue our negotiations and try and resolve the outstanding issues. I just want to be absolutely clear at 5:30, we will not be considering the cover decision and all the text put out this morning. We will continue to discuss those. But we will then meet again for another informal stock-taking plenary later tonight on these broader set of outcomes that we have been discussing this afternoon. The time for this plenary will be announced later today, and I assure you that sufficient notice will be given to everyone. So friends, we need to all get back to work. Let us drive progress and forge consensus, and as so many of you have said, the eyes of the world are on us. Thank you. I close this plenary.
J'ai une question qui va nous ramener peut-être aux prévisions, aux projections de production pour le pétrole et le gaz au Canada. Selon le dernier Production Gap Report, donc des données qui viennent du gouvernement canadien, on s'attend à ce que par rapport au niveau de production en 2019, à l'horizon de 2040, il y ait des augmentations de la production du pétrole pétrole et du gaz au Canada de l'ordre de 17-18 %. Également, donc, on soulignait ce matin